been a while, but it's no driving gloves tonight. Let's go ahead and apologize if anybody's follows us or listens to us via our YouTube channel. I'm in the process of helping market a car. Unfortunately, the auction ends on the 8th, and we're recording on the 7th, so you won't hear this until after the auction ends. But I posted a lot of videos to that YouTube channel to carry on to Bring a Trailer, and hopefully the auction goes well. If you're wondering what it was, watch some of those videos and go ahead and do the history search and Bring a Trailer. I'll just say ours doesn't have the orange wheels. Other than that, we've got Derek tonight. Will's on his way to, I'm going to say Derek's Hood, go to Bowling Green for the whatever car show's happening, probably across the street from Derek. But Will was...
Tri-5 Nationals.
Yeah, Will was nice enough to tell us about that at, 6 o'clock tonight, and we recorded 8, so Derek and I kind of scrambling, figuring out what to do tonight. I think Derek was out. I don't know. Do you want to tell people what you were out doing a little bit earlier and why we're now recording at 9:30 at night? Or is that a secret until you make a decision? Dun dun dun.
I was looking at a new acquisition for my private collection. Let's stick with that for now.
Yes. And Derek is looking at getting a launch edition Jeep.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. No, it's still under the Bowtie brand. It's under the Bowtie brand.
Well, won't Jeep be under the Bowtie brand when General Motors and Fiat merge? I saw some of that in the news recently that, I guess, Marconi passed away a little over a year ago, and everybody's saying he was right, and Fiat's got to merge with somebody now. And
I just thought all of them were going to merge together, and we were just going to have one automobile company.
Yes, Tesla will rule the world.
There you go. Boom.
Trying to be nice to good old Elon. Sorry, I just read Lee Iacocca's name again.
Wow. Wow.
So,
wow.
Well, I think even Musk probably would appreciate being compared to Lee Iacocca.
Well, actually, probably. I can see that.
Lee Iacocca being compared to Musk. That's probably a more accurate statement there. I don't know if he's watching us or paying attention to us on Twitter. Anytime you want to come on the show, Elon, we'll be glad to have you, and we'll let you talk about whatever you want.
Come on, he's a regular listener.
I'm sure he is. I don't think, I've been playing with my let's get a new car thing, so that's kind of where my hobby's been. I'm not sure what I want, what direction, but it's been more than a year since I've bought a car. It was a year ago I bought my van. 18 months ago I bought my SHO. So it might be time to get something else. I've even thought about getting a SHO that's a couple years older because I've got a 17, and a 17 and newer, you couldn't modify the ECU. But if I go back to like a 15, I can make that about a 600, 700 horsepower car really quick and really reliable. But I don't know what I want to do. I might end up keeping the two I have. But there's my car activity, the consulting job that I previously mentioned, the car that we have for listed.
Hey, that car I'm thinking about getting, I might be able to get like 45 mile per hour out of it.
Downhill with the tailwind.
And ice, yeah. That way it just slips, no friction.
I was going to say, in dealing with the car that we have on Bring a Trailer right now, and wandering around that guy's garage. He's got a wonderful garage. It's climate controlled, dust controlled. It's kind of like an operating room type thing, but 20 cars in it, and he's a hunter, so there's a lot of trophies there, or whatever you want to call it. In addition to that, there's a lot of collectibles and things, and it kind of got me thinking about some of the stuff. We always talk about collector cars and things like that, but the problem with cars, they're expensive. They take up a lot of room. They take up a lot of time. And I'll be honest, I'm guilty of, when I go to Target, I want to walk through the Hot Wheel aisle and see if there's an interesting Hot Wheel, and I still buy Hot Wheels. It's probably been 6 or 8 months since I bought my last Hot Wheel, and come to think of it, Jonathan, I just remembered I still owe you money for a Hot Wheel you sent me a couple of years ago. maybe I'll try to get in touch with you and get an address. Yeah, I think you even lived in Alabama at the time I bought that off of you, and now you're in northern Indiana. Derek, do you think you have a couple of things like kicking around, or when you're not buying cars and buying motors for your Falcon and new rides for you and the wife and things like that? Do you dabble in any of the collectible stuff? And I'm trying to think like small collectibles. I'm not talking about if we collect gas pumps and petroleum signs or whatever. But do you dabble in any of that stuff? Do you have any of that stuff sitting around your hall of antiques up there?
Yeah, actually, I do. You're right. I don't collect any of, I guess, what people call like, I think is it Petroliana? Is that how it's pronounced? I think I collect. I kind of like to collect kind of just weird old automotive stuff that's just, or maybe things that kind of relate to an earlier time period. I mean, I think everybody knows on here, we've probably mentioned it before, that I'm a clock guy too. So I acquire old clocks and stuff, but, and some other old furniture stuff, but like sitting around on just some of my bookshelves, things like that. I've got like an old card game from the early 20s that's based on like the best way I can explain it, it's kind of like the new version of the card game they brought out of Oregon Trail, the old computer game from when we were kids, in like the late 80s, early 90s. But it's from the 1920s, and it's about like taking an automobile trip. And you have all these cards that are like, oh, you got a flat tire, skip a turn or whatever. So I have that. I found that at an antique store years ago, and then I have like some old like road maps and atlases from the years of some of my cars, and eventually we'll probably go in them when I'm on road trips or going out to shows, just so you kind of have that period stuff along with your car. And I have like old model kits. I'm a big fan of that, picking up like the 50s, 60s era, like when model cars really started first coming out, picking up some of those. I have some that were my dad's when he was a kid, but then if I find them at like garage sales, places like antique stores, if they're a good buy, I'll pick them up. I think the older model kits are way cooler than what's out there today. I don't know why, just a personal preference, probably because they're all early cars, because that's what was cool to have in the 60s when you were model carring, was Duesenbergs and Packards and things like that. So I've got a bunch of those that I have set up in different places. So yeah, I collect kind of some of that oddball stuff. What about you?
I don't even know where you really buy new models, as you were talking about. I think it's a really lost thing. Maybe I can get them on Amazon and that. I know it's been a while since I walked through Michael's, but even they used to have an aisle, then they had half an aisle, then they had a little section. By now they might not even have those old car model kit, those testers kits, the plastic kits. And I know they had begun to start doing them in die cast metal, and you could, put them together real easy, and there was none of the getting glue on your fingers and gluing your fingers together and spilling a bottle of paint all over the kitchen table, and things that I used to do when I kind of played with models, like you said, when you were younger. And I still hang on to some of that stuff. But I think, I guess I collect some of the run-of-the-mill things. I've got to, I'll be honest, now it's a box full of die casts, because the bigger die casts, the 1/24th, 1/18th scale stuff, because, at one time it was cool and it was $30 a pop, and now all of a sudden I've spent $10,000 on these things and going, boy, I really wish I had $10,000 to buy a real car with. So I've become a little bit cheap when it comes to it, but I also enjoy a lot of the stuff I buy now, and really through the years, but it's probably what I exclusively buy, is, like you said, Derek, one-offs, odd things that I've never seen before. I mean, you go to any car show or swap meet, there's a guy that's got his die-cast booth. there's a guy, and no offense to him, I don't even know what their business is called now, but there's, the guy that sells every automotive book under the sun. That's where I bought a lot of my Lotus book collection. I almost have a better collection of Lotus books and information than the Barber Museum has. I actually have runs of magazines like Lotus and Sports Car Owner from 1957 to 1961 or 62. I have the complete set, and I don't even know if the Barber Museum has a single one of those. I have Lotus News because, for a majority of my life, I've been a Lotus fan. So I've got a lot of that stuff, and that's kind of unique, and not a lot of people have that stuff. But, as I'm walking through, and I enjoy going to antique malls or the swap meet buildings or whatever they want to call them. It's kind of a combination of both. I'm guilty of having booths in those at times, and I recently reopened another one. And by wandering through, occasionally I'll see stuff, and I've got some really nice glass sets. They're usually sets of 4, and one is highlighting the Maxwell car and a Buick and brass era cars. And I've got another one that's from like the 50s, and it's got an MGA on it, and I'm trying to think, maybe an E-Type, and some late 50s, early 60s British cars. And but they're drinking glasses, and both of those, not only do I have the glass sets, one of the big inspirations of spending the money on them, and it might have been 20 or 30 bucks for these sets. They actually had the original packaging and original boxes with them, and as I guess the American pickers will tell you, it's always cool if it's in the original box, and I fall guilty to that. Or, as Derek was telling us about his game, I bought one called Auto Week that's from 1986 or 87 at one point in time. The box is faded, and it's got all these trivia questions about cars, that were recent, and now it's technically, it's a 30-year-old game. So now the recent cars are now classic cars, and it'll probably be a really cool thing to do at a Radwood is sit down and play Auto Week, the game, and see how many of those 18, 25-year-old 80s car loving people can actually answer some of these obscure questions about 80s cars. So I'm a lot like,
See, in that, John, right there, what you're saying, that's what I like about some of these obscure, older, especially like the card games, stuff like that, because like I love getting that card game out. I've played it once, to be honest with you. Nobody ever wants to play the card game. I'm the one oddball. It's like, hey, you guys want to play this 1920s automobile card game? Everybody's like, yeah. Don't you have Cards Against Humanity? No. We actually do have that game, but anyway, I don't know. There's something to me about, and like you just talked about, like the glasses sets. And it made me think there's one that I've been looking for, trying to find a really nice, almost perfect, as nice a set as I could. I think it was like the 50s, maybe the early 50s, mid 50s, GM brought out a really beautiful, I guess I'll call it maybe Art Nouveau, drink, glass set. And had a silvered ring with the different cars on it, in, if I recall, in silver. Really beautiful. But there's something, and maybe it's also because I'm a historian and on the museum end of things, but I think there's just something cool about sitting down and actually experiencing the game, or the glasses that were made, and actually using them. Because it's kind of that tie to history too. I don't know. Again, it's just me kind of being a weird historian probably, but and it's like you say, sit down at Radwood and play a car game from the 1980s. That's what Radwood is all about. Dressing the part, looking the part, bringing the car of the era. Now you're going to add that game of the era, and it's just all about that overall experience of reliving something, which I think is a cool part of these little kind of ancillary things that we collect outside of just the big car itself.
And it's just like with your cars, you have to enjoy this stuff. I'm guilty right now. I still have a lot of stuff in storage. I moved into Zara's house, and Zara has it perfectly decorated and set up the way she, has had it for years, and I'm slowly integrating into it. So a lot of my automotive decoration stuff is not on display, but I have a lot of, just interesting things. I mean, for years, by choice, I kind of quit drinking in about 99, 2000. And what I would do on New Year's Eve is I would buy a Lego set and assemble Legos on New Year's Eve. It's something, my ex-wife laughed about, and I did up until maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. But every year it was a different Lego set. So I have some of the cool Lego sets, and now they're collector's items. Unfortunately, I opened the box and put them together, but I enjoyed them. And that's where I'm kind of going, is you've got to enjoy some of this, automotive stuff and this collector stuff you have. Big deal. I can say I have the stuff. It's no different than saying, oh, I do have that Ferrari GTO. It's at home in the garage. I never drive it because I don't want to put miles on it. It's like, it's the old saying, or the old thought process is, why have whatever so that you can save it for the next guy? There's some adult ways that's been compared. There's some very humorous ways that's been compared, but it's simply put, you've spent the money, you've had it. All you're doing by not using it is saving it for somebody else to use. Enjoy it. And it's the same with cars, same with this small stuff. So like Derek said, we need to get out and play these games. We need to play with or use the drinking sets or the glass sets, I guess. When I bought a book recently, and I was inspired to buy it because of the, John DeLorean movie that just came out on Netflix and or I guess on digital media. You can get it on just about anything, Amazon, Netflix, etc. And then we've got another one coming out about John DeLorean. And there's a book by Barry Weiss, or excuse me, I always call him Weiss. I don't know why. It's Barry Willis. Supposedly a great book. Barry still sells them out of his own house. I believe the book's self-published by Barry. Barry is actually a guy who was with John DeLorean from the initial concept sketches to beyond John DeLorean's involvement with the motor company. Barry's the guy that turned the lights out. He was the last guy to walk out of the factory in Ireland. So this book's supposed to tell a lot of that real story about John DeLorean. And those are things that I'm really inspired to do. But I took the opportunity to buy this book, and it might have been $60 or $80. But Barry has less than 100 of them left. And I've already seen them on Amazon, $400, $800. People trying to, sell these books new, unused. I bought this book. I'm going to read this book. I'm going to crack it open. I do have, William Taylor puts out some really nice automotive coffee table books. And I bought the last time he put the Lotus book out, it was Series 4. I bought the numbered edition, leather bound, and everything else. And then I bought a copy to read because I just kind of wanted the leather bound set. And he was nice enough, and I don't know how he put it all together or if it was the luck of the draw. I even thanked him. He sent me book number 7 in that 100 series. And of course, I enjoy the Lotus 7. That's even one of my favorite cars over a Viper or a CRF. I did get a book to preserve, and I did get a book to read, but you've got to enjoy the stuff. I spent a little bit extra to get the book to read, but I've enjoyed the book. And
that's one thing I didn't mention in that first go around of the kind of offshoot automobile things I collect. You talk about books. Of course, I've got the library of your standard, automotive history books, both from courses I had in college on the history of technology. But, I've got, what is it, AJ AJ, is it AJ Bain? Go Like Hell. Which is the book that they loosely based the new movie coming out about Carroll Shelby and all that on. Just kind of your general automotive history books. I have big library of those. But another thing I've gotten, I personally like to buy whenever I find them at antique stores or vintage bookstores, wherever I pop into on different journeys. I try to collect any book that's related to, of course, for me, like John, John's focused on a lot of Lotus stuff. For me, it's early cars, and I like to collect the old repair manuals or repair books. So some of the big ones are like the Dykes manual, and then you had Audell's automotive manuals. So I have copies of those. Actually, I'm really excited because just yesterday, another one's being sent. Just yesterday, I've got another one coming in the mail that is I think it's Brooks. It's a Brooks is the author. It's an automotive, again, repair manual. And it comes from 1916 is when that book was copyrighted. So, I like to collect those because not only is it interesting to see them and read them, but a lot of times they'll mention cars that I have, in my collection or that I'm working on for someone or, one of the museums I work with, or even just parts. When you're working on restoring a car, getting it running, sometimes let's say you've got a Bosch magneto on it. Well, you can go to some of these books and there's a whole section on working on a Bosch magneto. So you have the era appropriate guidance on how to work on that magneto and make sure it's working properly. And I'm sitting here at my desk recording tonight, and I'm looking at a stack of 4 books that I bought maybe 6 months ago. It's an old series of books, and it's mostly on early automotive electrical wiring and electrical components and how to work on them, how to wire them, how to make sure they're working right. So I also get into collecting that stuff. So not only does it look good, sitting around the house as, kind of a book on a shelf or a book on your desk, it's also a usable source when I'm working on one of these early cars and there might not be anything easy to reference. That's why I grab these things whenever I can find them, because they're getting scarce right now, and in 10, 20 years when, again, I'm hopefully still going to be involved in this hobby and working on early cars, which there's less and less people seeming to want to do that. These books are only going to get more and more rare to find and have to be able to use as a resource to actually work on the stuff. So that's another big area that I start kind of going out and buying stuff up whenever I can.
Derek's actually using and enjoying, and he has a practical application. Mine's kind of the collector. I want to read. I want to see what was going on. I do enjoy, like he said, the old Dykes manuals. I've got a couple kicking around here, and no, I'm never going to have a 1927 car in my collection. That's the reality of the thing. Doesn't matter how much money I have. I promise I will never have a 1927 anything. It's fun to see the technology and to go back. When I was restoring a 16 Packard that I had, part of my job is to obtain literature to be period correct and to have the labor rates and the price sheets. And, it would be so nice if I could just go ahead and order a new magneto right here for $1.50, and to even see what the labor times, the flat rate times were when it started to get developed, how it started to get developed. Derek's talking about kind of the stuff he collects, and I talked a lot about the Lotus stuff that I collect. Allow a little bit of your budget. I always look at cars, and I was talking to somebody about this week, and it's a conversation that comes up quite often, and some people have realized it and have this conversation, and some people don't, and gosh, I'm spending too much money. But cars are your hobby. Cars are fun. If you fished, or if you were a fisherman You would have a boat. You would have gear. You would buy tackle and lure. You would, every time you go to Bass Pro, you might spend $20 or $30 on a lure. I assume that's what they cost. For us, we walk through the antique mall and we spend 20 or $30 on something cool automotive-ish. We walk through Target and spend $5 on Hot Wheel cars. We go to a swap meet or an automotive thing, and sometimes I'll buy a sign or I'll buy a cool part just because it's cool and it's interesting and it'll be neat to display. So you can't be guilty or feel guilty about spending the money, because all hobbies cost money. I compared fishermen there. If you're a hunter, you've got your four-wheeler, you got your rifle, you got your gear, you've got your bullets. And if you're as good of a shot as me, it's going to take you 6 or 7 bullets at $1 a bullet to, kill something. Obviously, I'm not a good shot. You just have to look at your car as a hobby and the car stuff as a hobby and go out and buy what you enjoy. I'm not saying go broke, don't spend $50 a week if you unfortunately only make $300 a week. Just kind of figure out a little bit of a budget and allow yourself, if you're only making $1,500 a month, give yourself $20 to, treat yourself for something for your hobby. And that's the neat thing about the little things is then when people come over or kids come over to your home, or as you get older, if you're a kid, if you're a child and you're using your allowance to do this, I can't tell you the number of cars and stuff I have from my youth. I've got an old Daisy Duke Jeep. I've got this old plastic van, and everybody knows how crazy I am with vans. And the model kits that Derek talked about, I've got a little snap together. It's a green van, but it's from the 70s. So this van kit is a strict 70s van. It's got the water transfer decals on it and a 70s scheme. And it's like lime green with yellow trim and yellow wheels and little hood scoops, on the roof. And it's something that harkens back to my youth and reminds me a lot of my younger car days. I talk about, and I'm not saying do this anybody, but I kind of attribute to when I became a car guy. I've always been in my life a car guy, since the day I was born. But sometime in 1983, I went home from the school library with a Car and Driver magazine, and it never made it back to the library. Or here we are, 40 years later, 37 years later, and I still have that magazine, and it's framed here in my office. It's just a reminder of my youth and becoming a car person.
What are your current late fees up to?
I don't know. They let me graduate, so.
But John, yeah, that's trying to kind of maybe turn that around a little bit too. What you're talking about here, it's also a great way for kids to just get into the car hobby before you can afford, or even if if you don't make enough money in your current situation, whatever it is, to afford the actual car that you're hoping to have. I mean, a great way to work up to that or start, I guess, in some ways satisfying that interest you have is to, buy what you can afford that maybe relates to the vehicle or that part of the hobby that you're interested in. If you're weird like me and you're interested in the early stuff, brass era or horseless carriage or classic era or one of those, let's call it pre-World War II era stuff, you start picking up some of the books that are, written about early cars. I mean, one of the first books I ever acquired was the Standard Catalog of American Cars from 1805 to 1942. And it's literally just a basically encyclopedic catalog of all of the cars that were built in the U.S. from 1805 to 1942. Beverly Ray Kimes, Osty Clark Jr., put it together. And obviously there's probably some in there they missed because there were a lot of cars built. I couldn't afford, and I mean, I still really can't afford a horse carriage or a brass era car quite yet. Working towards it. I read that book. I sat and read that book and just learned about these cars, learned about their histories, and it just grows your knowledge. It allows you to grow, your knowledge about the cars. It allows you to learn about them. That way, when you do start working up towards owning one of those cars or something, you have that really good foundation and that base in what you've already done to help you along the way in the hobby. I mean, so it's another thing where we talk about this stuff and I say, oh yeah, now I grab a $20 set of books that I find because they're from the 20s and they talk about early automotive stuff. I've been doing that since before I was even owned an old car, because it's what I was interested in. It was a passion, and it was the way I could kind of, let's call it, get the fix in the hobby without having the car. So I think it's also a good way to get yourself involved in the hobby and promote the hobby.
It's one of those fun things, and I had a direction I was going when I leaned towards the microphone here, and in that little straight line, I got lost. I know the book Derek was referring to there, the standard catalog of, automobiles. I have that one. I have all the, maybe you know what they're called, Derek, but they're black books, and you can get a Chevrolet, Ford, Chevelle, Corvette. Has all the breakdown of VIN numbers and that. I have every one that was ever published.
Oh yeah.
And the part of that's for my appraisal business is to verify serial numbers and know what options and make sure to decode cars. I have a lot of books on that subject, and what's funny is I bought those back in 05 or 06. Now all that stuff's available on the internet. I have 2 shelves dedicated to these books about numbers, chassis numbers, VIN numbers, engine numbers. I've got a book exclusively about engine numbers. And like I said, you can find all that stuff on the internet, but there's still something to me to be able to go look it up in a book and easily be able to copy the page or be able to take the book with you to the appraisal. Granted, I can have my iPad out and try to look it up and hope I have good internet signal and hope the sun's not glaring. The book never gives me that problem. So some of the stuff I have is from practicality standpoint. Some of it's from sheer enjoyment, and I've got Clive Chapman joked with me once because I have a painting from Betty Hill, autographed by Betty Hill, Graham Hill's widow, and I have a Lotus book autographed, and unfortunately I'm forgetting her name, but it was Jimmy Clark's ex-girlfriend, and I have these 3 widows, and I was saying Clive joked that I probably am assembling the largest collection of autographs from racing widows, and it's not something I achieved to do, but it's something that, the painting was at the Indianapolis Grand Prix in, I don't know, 04, 05, and me and my ex-wife saw it, and we buy art because it impacts us the moment we see it. It's not that we sit there and analyze it and, look at the reflection off Monaco here and this building here. No, we like the impact, and it was signed by Betty Hill. And you just do it. It's the risky business saying. Sometimes you've got to say what the frack and take some chances. Just go for it. As long as you keep a little bit of financial soundness about you, but we're talking the car hobby, and if any of us were sane financial advisors, we wouldn't be in the car hobby. I think we've touched on the topic. I'll let you go ahead.
Me, I should probably pay my mortgage this month, shouldn't I?
Well, it's only the 7th.
Oh, all right, I'm good then.
I can't give you credit advice.
No, yeah. Don't check my credit score. No, I completely agree. And, I guess I start to wander outside of that automobile collecting as well, as people know, as we talked about. But probably one of the cooler things I've acquired recently. I actually really love having, and even though the car is not done yet, I think everybody knows I have the 1923 V8 Peerless. That is a barn find. We've had it up on our social media before, the picture of it the day I found it, or the day I went to pick it up and move it out of the barn. Probably, it must be almost a year ago now. I was just kind of perusing through Facebook. I belong to a number of the groups that are forming now. The 1920s automobile group, and the Brass era and pre-war car group, and the Speedsters only, or all these different groups that are out there. And hopefully some of those people in those groups listen to us. Occasionally, somebody on there will post some stuff they found on. It just randomly came up one day. A guy had posted in one of the classic era groups or something, this tire pressure gauge, but it was for a Peerless, and it was the correct Peerless logo for the early 20s. I started kind of thinking about it. I was like, well, that's kind of cool because it matches the car. It's right. It's the right tire gauge for the car. And all of a sudden, the next thing you know, I'm placing a bid on eBay and buying this, early 20s Peerless tire pressure gauge that right now it just sits, on a table in the living room in the house as kind of decoration, if you will. Actually, right next to that automobile card game I was telling everyone about. But one day when the Peerless is back on the road, it'll live in the Peerless and just be another kind of component of the story of that car, and also my kind of crazy collecting sickness that I have.
Sickness is the right word for it. You talk about your eBay impulse buys and stuff, and it's not automobilia, it's automobiles, but that's how I ended up with my Caterham 7. We went and looked at an lease one weekend. Probably should save this to the interesting car stories episode, but my ex-wife and I, we went and looked at a lease one weekend just back in 05, 06 when they were basically brand new cars. It was one of the first used ones we had come across, and I drove it, and she knew we were going to buy it and go home with it. I got out of it and I said, nah, if I'm going to get something like this, I'm going to buy a Caterham or a Lotus 7. Like the next Thursday or Friday it was, she sent me a link, and it might have been on eBay, I think it was, to a Caterham. He goes, but she said, hey, you wanted your trailer, check this out. So I clicked it, and it was the Caterham with the trailer. So me and the impulse person I was at the time, I'm no longer this way. I bought a plane ticket before I ever called her back, and I said, my return message to her was, I'm flying to Fort Lauderdale on Tuesday. And hers is, what? I said, I'm going down to look at that car and trailer on Tuesday, and went down on Tuesday, came back. By Friday, had bought it, and to complicate things, I had to sell my lowered S10 four-cylinder pickup, and I bought a 05 Dodge Dakota leftover, so this would have been 06. So that I could actually tow the car back, because the S10 wouldn't do it, and I couldn't find a way to ship a car and a trailer this side of renting a U-Haul. And my impulse buy got me a pickup truck, got me a trailer, and got me a car. You do have to be careful of your impulse buys, because the same month I bought my Lotus Europa, and by the end of the month I had a chance to buy a Lotus 110 bicycle, new in the crate out of Sweden. It was like $10,000, and I was out of money. I couldn't get my bicycle. Not that I would have ever rode it. There's the danger. That's how bad it can get. And it's not that I was rich. It's not that I am rich. That's why I keep giving you, be sure to stick to a budget. I've sometimes went crazy with my budget. And I think I even said to my fiancée Zara yesterday or day before, I need to get rid of some of these cars, or I need to do something, because a cocaine habit would be cheaper. I could be rich if I didn't have the car habit, but you know what? I've enjoyed it. Get your automobile.
And there you go. That is a great point you make, because it's like you said right near the beginning of the podcast today. You got to enjoy the stuff, and I guess the question you have to ask yourself, and this is in any hobby, any habit that you have, and we're not obviously We're not condoning cocaine use or alcoholism or anything like that.
Speak for yourself.
But okay, you can not spend the money on a hobby. You can put it in the bank and save it. Ultimately, what are you going to do with that money? It's up to all of us to figure out how we want to enjoy our lives. We work hard for our money. What we're going to do with that money to enjoy our life. And it's what you just said, John. Maybe I could be rich right now, and maybe I would have a lot more money in the bank right now if I didn't own some of the cars I did. But you know what? I enjoy working on them. I enjoy owning them. I enjoy knowing that I've collected these cars, and if I really do need that money someday, well, guess what? One of them's going up for sale somewhere, and I'll get the money and I'll have the money. But like you say, for now, it's like spending $10 on a automobile card game from the 20s at an antique store. Yeah, I could save the $10, but it's kind of fun to have that thing laying around and just look at it now and then and think, yeah, that's kind of cool.
So after the No Driving Gloves financial advice podcast we've just given you,
we're trying to branch out here.
Derek's right, and it's what it's something that, like I just said, if financial advice, don't take this. Any of the accountants and that out there that listen to us are pulling their hair out, going, "You guys shut up," and we will here in a few minutes, I promise. But why are we saving the money other than to take care of us in our retirement? Take care of your 401ks or whatever your retirement plans are, and don't borrow against them to get your toy cars. Don't borrow against your house to get your toy cars. I believe a lot of the run-up of cars in the muscle cars in 04 through 08, I call them home equity cars and things like that, as you borrow against your house because it appreciated, and you saw where it got us, or it got a lot of people. A lot of people save money to go on vacations. A lot of people save money so they can have the big screen TV, or a lot of people save up so they can have the best podcasting equipment, say. We choose, again, it's talking about our hobbies. We choose to have cars. That's what we have fun with. I would rather go out 6 Friday nights on a cool evening and, say back when I had my Porsche, with the top down, cruising, and do that for 3 hours on 6 nights and have 18 hours of fun doing that per year, as opposed to taking a week off and going to the beach. That's my idea of fun. So instead of saving up to go to the beach, I saved up and bought a Porsche. And after a year, like most of my cars, I got rid of it, and still some days kick myself for doing that. I'm going to kind of be quiet before we give you any more poor financial advice. Enjoy your car hobby. Don't feel guilty about it. As long as people are fed, you're not going broke, you've budgeted properly, and I gotta emphasize that enough. There's been many times that I have not done that, and it's come back to bite me through it all, but it's created some lean times, and it's definitely created some arguments and fights and some stress. So if you just do it responsibly, you can have fun, enjoy the little toys, and be sure to take those little $20 breaks. And for those of you that are 8 and 12, 14 years old out there, instead of buying necessarily a game card for your latest video game, maybe buy, instead of spending $20 on that, go ahead and buy a $10 card and 2 Hot Wheels and a hot dog. In the long run, you'll still go back and look at those Hot Wheels, as I do with my collection of 500 Hot Wheels. If I didn't cut Derek off early, I'm going to end this podcast and talk to everybody next week.
And don't forget, with that hot dog you kids are eating, eat your vegetables, okay?
Vegetables are what my hot dog eats.
See you next week.
Talk to you later. Bye.